If you grew up in America between 1950 and 1990, you know that smell. The faint chemical tong of a fresh roll of film. The satisfying click of advancing to the next frame. The nervous wait at the drugstore counter to pick up your prints. Those pictures in the little yellow envelope. Birthdays. Christmases. Summer vacations. Your kids on the first day of school. Almost all of them were captured on one company's film. *** in 1976. The Eastman Kodak Company controlled 90% of all the photographic films sold in the United States. 90%. They were one of the 10 most recognized brand names on earth. Their hometown of Rochester, New York, was so thoroughly built around the company that locals simply called it Kodak City. ***, in January 2012. Kodak filed for bankruptcy. They owed $1 billion. But here's the part of the story that nobody forgets once they hear it. Kodak didn't go bankrupt because digital photography snuck up on them. Kodak invented digital photography. A Kodak engineer built the world's first digital camera in 1975. 27 years before the company collapsed, they held the future in their hands. And they put it in a drawer. ***, Rochester, New York. 1878. George Eastman was not born to wealth or privilege. He was born in 1854 in Waterville, New York, the son of a farmer turned schoolteacher. When his father died of a brain disease in 1862, 8-year-old George became the man of the house almost overnight. By the time he was 14, he had dropped out of school to help support his mother and 2 sisters. He found work as an office boy at an insurance company in Rochester, earning $3 a week. He taught himself bookkeeping at night from library books. By 20, he was a junior bank clerk, careful with numbers and quietly burning with ambition. ***, in 1877. When George Eastman was 23 years old, he decided to take a vacation to Santo Domingo. A colleague suggested he photograph the trip. Eastman thought that was a fine idea, until he looked into what photography actually required. To take a single photograph in 1877, you needed a wooden camera the size of a steamer trunk, a heavy iron tripod, glass plates the size of serving platters, 3 separate chemical solutions for developing those plates, a portable darkroom tent you had to set up on location, and someone to help carry all of it. The total weight of the equipment came to more than 50 pounds. The cost was more than what Eastman earned in a month. ***, Eastman canceled the trip to Santo Domingo, but he could not let go of the problem. Why was photography so impossibly complicated? Why was it only available to professionals and wealthy hobbyists? He bought the equipment anyway, not to travel with it, but to study it. He began spending his evenings in a rented kitchen, teaching himself the chemistry of photography from British scientific journals. He worked until 2 or 3 in the morning, then got up at dawn and went back to the bank. His mother worried he was destroying his health. He told her he was fine. He was not fine. He was obsessed. The invention that changed everything ***, in 1878. British photographers had been experimenting with a new technique, coating glass plates with a dry gelatin emulsion instead of the old wet chemical process. Eastman read about it and immediately saw the practical implications. If photographers didn't have to mix and apply wet chemicals in the field, the process would become dramatically simpler. He set out to improve the gelatin emulsion formula, and by 1879 he had developed a machine that could coat glass plates quickly and uniformly. He was 25 years old. He sailed to England to patent his machine. The British examiner told him it was the most thorough patent application he had seen from an amateur in years. In 1880, Eastman began selling his coated plates to professional photographers. They worked beautifully. Word spread quickly through the tight-knit photography community. Orders arrived from across the country that same year. He leased the 3rd floor of a building on State Street in Rochester and hired his first employees. He was still working full-time at the bank. In 1881, he finally quit the bank. He was 27 years old and betting everything on a technology most people had never heard of. $1. One camera. One revolution. Eastman never stopped working on the central problem. Glass plates were better than wet chemistry, but glass was still heavy, fragile, and expensive. What if you could replace the glass with something light and flexible? What if the camera itself could be made small enough to hold in one hand? It took 7 years of constant experimentation. But in 1884, Eastman patented a paper-based flexible film. And in 1888, he introduced the product that would make his name famous around the world, the Kodak No. 1. It was a small wooden box covered in black leather. It was preloaded with enough film for 100 exposures. It cost $25, about what a factory worker earned in a week at the time. And it came with the most democratic guarantee in the history of commerce. You press the button, we do the rest. When your 100 shots were used up, you mailed the entire camera back to the factory in Rochester. 10 days later, you got back 100 printed photographs, and the camera, freshly loaded with new film, ready to go again. No chemistry. No darkroom. No expertise required. Photography had just become something any American could do. By the way, the word Kodak meant absolutely nothing. Eastman made it up. He wanted a name that was short, impossible to misspell, impossible to mispronounce in any language, and started and ended with the letter K, which he considered the sharpest, most emphatic letter in the alphabet. The name was a work of pure marketing genius, at a time when the word marketing hadn't yet been invented. The $1 camera that conquered Christmas *** in 1900. Eastman introduced the Brownie camera for $1. $1. At a time when a loaf of bread cost a nickel, a Brownie was still an affordable gift. Certainly by Christmas saving standards, the Brownie was aimed specifically at children. Eastman understood something that no marketer would articulate in formal terms for another 50 years. If a child grows up with a Kodak camera, they become a Kodak customer for life. In the first year alone, 150,000 Brownies were sold. For the next generation of Americans, the parents and grandparents of many people watching this film, a Brownie under the Christmas tree was the beginning of a lifetime of captured memories. *****. Building the Empire, 1900 to 1940. By 1910, Eastman Kodak had opened manufacturing plants in England, France, Germany, Canada, and Australia. The Rochester factory complex, which Eastman called Kodak Park, had grown into one of the largest industrial sites in the United States, covering hundreds of acres along the Genesee River. Eastman ran his empire with meticulous attention to every detail. Just as he had run his kitchen laboratory 30 years before, quality standards were absolute. Every batch of film was tested. Every chemical formula was documented. Every piece of equipment was calibrated to the same specification. He also treated his workers in ways that were genuinely unusual for the era. In 1912, he introduced profit sharing for all employees. In 1919, he gave away a third of his personal stock, worth more than $10 million, to his workers. He built a dental clinic for employees' children. He funded a hospital. He established a pension plan decades before such things were common. In Rochester, Eastman Kodak was not just an employer, it was the fabric of daily life. The colors of memory. In 1935. Kodak introduced Kodachrome, the world's first commercially successful color film. If you are of a certain age, you know exactly what Kodachrome looks like. There is a warmth to it, a particular richness, that no digital filter has ever quite replicated. Kodachrome was so beloved by photographers that in 1973, singer-songwriter Paul Simon wrote a song with that single word as its title. The chorus asked his mama not to take his Kodachrome away. The song went to number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100. It remains the only time a photographic film has inspired a hip-hop record. In 1942, Kodak introduced Kodacolor, the first color negative film that made color prints affordable for everyday Americans. Before Kodacolor, color photographs were a luxury. After it, they were just Tuesday. The post-war boom. When every American became a photographer. If you were born between 1946 and 1964. Kodak was simply part of the furniture of your childhood. The company and the baby boom grew up together. After World War II, millions of American families moved into new suburbs with fresh mowed lawns. two-car garages, and picture windows made to be looked out of. They had money in their pockets for the first time in their lives. They had children, and they wanted to remember it all. Kodak was ready for exactly that moment. In 1963, the company introduced the Kodak Instamatic, a camera with a cartridge-loading film system so simple that a child could operate it. No threading film in the dark, no guessing at exposure settings. You dropped in the cartridge, snapped the back shut, and you were ready to shoot. The Instamatic sold 50 million units in its first 7 years. It remains one of the best-selling consumer products in American history. Asterisk. The moon belongs to Kodak on July 20, 1969. When Neil Armstrong stepped off the ladder of the lunar lander and set foot on the surface of the moon, he was carrying a Hasselblad camera loaded with Kodak film. Every photograph taken on the lunar surface, the boot print in the dust, the American flag, the Earth rising over the lunar horizon, was captured on Kodak film. When those images appeared on the front page of every newspaper in the world, they were, in a very literal sense, Kodak's work. The company didn't pay for that advertising. History paid for it. By 1976, Kodak employed more than 136,000 people in the United States alone. The company controlled 90% of American film sales and 85% of American camera sales. Their annual revenues exceeded $10 billion. In Rochester, roughly 1 in every 3 residents either worked for Kodak directly or worked for a business that depended on Kodak. The company funded the Eastman School of Music, one of the finest music conservatories in the world. They funded the University of Rochester's Medical Center. They funded parks, libraries, and symphony orchestras. In Rochester, you didn't go to work for Kodak, you became part of Kodak, and Kodak became part of you. Christmas Eve, 1975, Rochester, New York. His name was Steve Sasson. He was 24 years old and had been working at Kodak for less than 2 years since graduating from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. In early 1975. His supervisor, a senior engineer named Gareth Lloyd, gave him a quiet, open-ended assignment. Take a look at these new CCD chips, coupled devices that were just coming out of electronics labs, and see if there's anything practical Kodak might do with them. No deadline, no specific goal, just see what you find. Steve Sasson found something. The device weighed about 8 pounds. It captured images through a lens borrowed from a Super 8 movie camera, converted them into electronic signals through the CCD chip, and stored them, 16 of them, in sequence, on a standard audio cassette tape. It had a resolution of 10,000 pixels, which is about 0.01 megapixels in today's terms. A modern smartphone takes pictures at roughly 1,000 times that resolution. To take a picture and store it on the tape took 23 seconds. To view the pictures, you connected the device to a television set. On December 24, 1975, Steve Sasson pointed his invention at a lab technician named Joy Marshall and pressed the button. 23 seconds later, a blurry black-and-white image of Joy's face appeared on a television screen. It was the world's first digital photograph, and it had been taken inside the headquarters of the world's largest photographic film company. The meeting that changed history. In early 1976, Steve Sasson gave a series of presentations to Kodak management teams showing them what his device could do. He has described these meetings and interviews many times since. The reactions were consistent. The managers were polite. They were curious in the way you are curious about something that does not concern you. They asked questions about the image quality, which was, admittedly, terrible, and about the cost of the components. They listened. And then one of the senior managers said something that Steve Sasson has never forgotten. That's cute, but don't tell anyone about it. Don't tell anyone about it. Not. Let's develop this further. Not. Let's fund a team to make this smaller and better. Not. Let's think carefully about what this means for our business in 10 or 20 years. Don't tell anyone about it. Kodak filed a patent on the device. U.S. Patent No. 4131919, granted in 1978, and quietly set the project aside. Steve Sasson went back to his desk and worked on other things. The world's first digital camera gathered dust in a filing cabinet. *Y. The most expensive logic in corporate history. To understand why Kodak buried its own invention, you have to understand one number, 70%. In the 1970s and 1980s, Kodak's profit margin on photographic film was approximately 70 cents on every dollar of revenue. This was not a good business. It was a spectacular business. One of the most profitable manufacturing businesses in American history. Every roll of Kodak film sold at a drugstore. Every Kodacolor print developed at the local photo lab. Every box of Kodak paper used to print those pictures. All of it flowed back to Rochester in an unending golden river. Now imagine someone comes into your office and says, "I've invented something that could eventually replace all of this. It would eliminate the need for film, for chemicals, for photo labs. The prints wouldn't exist on paper. They'd exist on television screens." To the men running Kodak in 1976. Digital photography was not an opportunity. It was a threat to the single most profitable business model they had ever seen. Why would you fund the destruction of your own golden goose? The decision to suppress it seemed rational. It was rational in the short term, but short-term rationality sometimes produces long-term catastrophe, and this was one of those times. 1981. The warning from Tokyo **** in August of 1981. Sony introduced the Mavica, short for magnetic video camera. It was an electronic camera that stored images on a small magnetic disc instead of film. It was not a digital camera in the modern sense. It captured analog video frames rather than true digital images. The resolution was poor. The camera itself was bulky and expensive. Sony's Mavica made headlines around the world as a preview of a filmless future. Inside Kodak, the official reaction was measured. One senior marketing executive told a reporter, "Our customers want photographs on paper. That is not changing." He was right about 1981. He was wrong about 1991, and he was catastrophically wrong about 2001. But the men running Kodak in 1981 were not fools. They knew the digital threat was real. And so they did something sensible. They hired the consulting firm, McKinsey, to study the situation and tell them what the future looked like. It's the report they wished they hadn't read. The McKinsey study, completed in 1981, contained two findings that the Kodak board would spend the next decade trying to ignore. Finding 1. Digital photography would completely replace film photography within 10 to 15 years. Finding 2. Kodak had a window of opportunity, roughly a decade, to lead the transition themselves, on their own terms, using their enormous brand reputation and manufacturing resources. The board, read the report. They discussed it seriously, and then they concluded that the 10-year timeline gave them plenty of room. After all, they were still growing. They were still profitable. The Kodak Instamatic was still selling magnificently. Why would you deliberately disrupt something that was working so well? This is the question at the heart of every great corporate tragedy. Not, did they know the threat was coming? They always know. But, did they act in time? Almost never. The human side of the story. What Kodak meant to Rochester, before we follow the collapse. It is worth pausing for a moment to understand what was at stake, not in dollars, but in lives. In 1982, Kodak employed 136,000 people worldwide, with roughly 60,000 in the Rochester area alone. In a city of about 250,000 people, that was not just significant employment, that was a way of life. Kodak paid its workers well, union wages that supported a solidly middle-class existence. They offered health insurance, pension plans, and educational benefits for employees' children. They funded the hospital where those children were born. They funded the parks where those families picnicked on summer. Sundays. Young engineers competed fiercely for Kodak positions. You didn't just get a job at Kodak, you got security. You got a career. You got the unspoken promise that if you showed up and did good work, the company would be there for you until retirement and beyond. That was the promise. In 1982, It seemed unshakable. The 1980s, slow motion, then fast asterisk. Through most of the 1980s, Kodak's troubles were invisible to the outside world. The company was still enormously profitable. Film sales were strong. The Kodak brand remained one of the most trusted in America. But inside the company, pressure was building. Japanese filmmakers, Fujifilm in particular, were attacking Kodak's market share with aggressive pricing. Fuji's films were good. They were cheaper. And in 1984, Fuji pulled off a publicity coup that sent shockwaves. Through Kodak's executive suite, they became the official film of the Los Angeles Olympic Games. The Los Angeles Olympics were heavily televised, with billions of viewers worldwide. Fuji's yellow and green colors were everywhere. The company that had held 90% of the American market for a century suddenly had a credible rival. Kodak's market share in film began to slip, first by 1%, then 2%. Small numbers, but a trend that was not going to reverse. Meanwhile, the digital cameras at electronics conferences were getting better. Still expensive. Still low quality by film standards. But visibly, measurably better, every single year. In 1989, Kodak's CEO told a conference audience that Kodak would be a leader in digital imaging. This was a promise that sounded bold and proved to be hollow. The film business was still too profitable. The digital investment required too large. The cultural change too radical. The words came out right. The commitment never followed. 1994. A new CEO. The same problem in 1993. Kodak's board made a genuinely unusual decision. They hired an outsider as CEO for the first time in the company's 111-year history. His name was George Fisher, and he was coming from Motorola, where he had helped build the cell phone business into a global leader. He was smart, energetic, and genuinely enthusiastic about Kodak's digital potential. Fisher immediately understood the central challenge. Kodak was not primarily a photography company. It was a chemistry company that happened to be in the photography business. Its entire culture, its factories, its research labs, its sales force, its way of thinking was built around physical substances: silver, gelatin, paper, chemicals. Digital photography required none of those things. It required software engineers and electronic component manufacturers and computer scientists. It required a completely different kind of company. Fisher set out to build that company. He invested billions in digital research. He launched new digital products. He made strategic acquisitions. He gave speech after speech about Kodak's digital future, and he ran directly into the same wall that every previous Kodak executive had run into. The film business was still generating enormous profits, and those profits were needed to fund the digital transformation. He was trying to cross a river without a bridge, using the very current he was fighting to carry him. 1997. The dam breaks. In 1997. Something happened that Kodak's internal forecasts had predicted but nobody was quite ready for. Consumer digital cameras fell below $500 for the first time. $500 was still a significant purchase, but it was within reach. For Christmas 1997, digital cameras appeared under trees across America for the first time. American film sales fell by 3% that year. It was the first decline in 2 decades. 3% sounds small, but the trend was about to turn vertical. 1998. Film sales down 8%. 1999, down 12%. 2000, down 17%. 2001, down 24%. 2002, down 30%. These were not rounding errors. This was an industry dying in real time. The photo labs that Kodak depended on for a significant portion of its revenue began closing by the hundreds. The one-hour photo shops that had been anchors of American strip malls since the 1970s were vanishing. Their customers weren't switching to a different brand of film. They were switching to a different universe entirely. The Kodak moment, spent in 2001. Kodak sold its last profitable year of film. The numbers still looked impressive on paper, but everyone inside the company knew that what they were looking at was not a plateau. It was a cliff. In 2003, Kodak made the announcement that would have been unthinkable just a decade earlier. They were abandoning the consumer film camera market in developed countries. A company that had put cameras in the hands of every American family for 100 years was walking away from the camera business. The same year, they announced the layoff of 15,000 employees, 15,000 people in Rochester and around the world, many of them with 20 or 30 years of loyal service, received the news that the promise Kodak had made to them, show up, do good work, and we'll be there for you, was being broken. The iPhone and the final verdict on January 9, 2007. Apple CEO Steve Jobs walked onto a stage in San Francisco and introduced the iPhone. He described it as 3 products in one: a widescreen iPod with touch controls, a revolutionary mobile phone, and a breakthrough internet communications device. He did not describe it as a camera, but it was one. A very good one, and it was about to be in the pocket of every American. For Kodak, the iPhone was not just another competitor. It was the moment when the last piece of their business model disappeared. Kodak had been pivoting toward a world where people would still print digital photographs, still need paper, still need inks, still need the tactile experience of a photo in your hand. The iPhone helped create a world where people looked at their pictures on a glowing 4-inch screen, shared them instantly with family across the country, and never thought about printing them at all. The market. Kodak had spent a decade pivoting toward simply stopped existing. In 2008, Kodak lost $442 million. In 2009, they lost $210 million. In 2010, they lost $687 million. In 2011, they lost $764 million. By the end of 2011, Kodak stock, which had traded at nearly $90 a share in 1997, had fallen below $1. January 19, 2012, Rochester, New York. Asterisk. Before the Rochester workday began on the morning of January 19, 2012, the Eastman Kodak Company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in federal court. In New York City, the filing listed liabilities of $6.8 billion against assets of $5.1 billion, a deficit of $1.7 billion. Chapter 11 is not liquidation. It is reorganization. The company keeps operating while it works out a plan to pay its creditors. Kodak's lawyers were careful to emphasize that this was not the end. It was a new beginning, but for anyone who had grown up with a Kodak camera, who had stood in a drugstore parking lot on a Saturday afternoon, ripping open that yellow envelope to see how their pictures came out, it felt like an ending. I worked at Kodak for 32 years. Started on the production floor and worked my way up to quality control supervisor. My father worked there before me. 3 of my friends from high school worked there too. When I heard about the bankruptcy, I sat at my kitchen table, and I just couldn't believe it. I kept thinking, how does something that big, that solid, just disappear? Retired Kodak production supervisor, age 68. Rochester. My wife and I both worked at Kodak. That's where we met. Actually, in the cafeteria at Kodak Park in 1971, we bought our house in 1974. Because of those Kodak salaries. Sent 2 kids to college. When the bankruptcy happened, we'd been retired for 6 years. Thank God. But our neighbors, people we'd known for 20 years, lost their jobs. Some of them lost their pensions. That was a hard thing to watch. Retired Kodak engineer, age 74. Rochester selling the silverware, the patent auction as the bankruptcy proceedings unfolded. Something startling emerged from the accounting. The most valuable thing Kodak owned was not its factories, not its brand, not its manufacturing equipment. It was patents. Kodak held more than 1,100 patents covering fundamental technologies in digital imaging, digital printing, and electronic display of photographs. Many of these patents were so foundational that companies like Apple, Google, Samsung, and Facebook were essentially using Kodak invented technology every time they handled a digital image. In 2012, Kodak sold that patent portfolio for $527 million. The buyers included a consortium of technology giants, among them Apple and Google. Let that sink in for a moment. Apple and Google, the two companies whose products had done more than any others to make photographic film obsolete, paid over $500 million for technologies that a Kodak engineer had invented. Technologies that Kodak had suppressed, delayed and failed to commercialize. It may be the most expensive act of self-defeat in American industrial history. The new Kodak Eastman Kodak Company emerged from bankruptcy in September of 2013. The restructured company was smaller, quieter, and focused almost entirely on commercial printing, high-speed digital printing systems for businesses, publishers and packaging companies. It was a viable business. It is still a viable business today. The company is publicly traded, it generates revenue, it employs several thousand people, but it is not the Kodak that George Eastman built. It is not the Kodak that put a camera in every American household. It is not the company that photographed the moon landing and manufactured the film in Paul Simon's song. That Kodak is gone. Kodak Park today, the sprawling complex along the Genesee River, that was once Kodak Park, now goes by a different name, Rochester Technology Park. Many of its buildings have been repurposed. Dozens of small companies, biotechnology firms, software developers, photonics researchers, occupy spaces where Kodak once coated film and mixed chemicals. It is not a ruin. Rochester has worked hard to rebuild around the void that Kodak's collapse left, and in a strange way the breakup of one massive employer has seeded an ecosystem of smaller ones. Many of the entrepreneurs running these new companies are former Kodak engineers who took their knowledge and their severance checks and started something of their own, but nobody who knew Rochester in 1980 would look at it today and say it looks the same. The population has fallen by a third. The downtown has changed. The certainty is gone, that rock-solid sense that the city had a foundation that couldn't be moved. The unexpected return of film. Here is something George Eastman could not have predicted, and something that most business analysts would have declared impossible a decade ago. Photographic film is making a comeback. Since around 2015, film photography has experienced a genuine resurgence, not a return to its former scale, but a real and measurable revival. Young people who grew up entirely in the digital age are discovering film as something deliberately different, something slower, something that forces you to think before you press the button because you only have 24 or 36 frames in each. One costs real money. Film sales in the United States have grown for several consecutive years. The major film manufacturers, Fujifilm and Kodak Alaris among them, have been unable to keep popular stocks on shelves. New companies are manufacturing film from scratch. Photography stores that seemed headed for extinction are reopening. In 2017, Kodak relaunched Ektachrome, the beloved slide film that had been discontinued in 2012. In response to demand from photographers who had never stopped loving its particular quality of light. It is a niche market. It will never return to the scale of the 1970s, but its existence speaks to something that all the market research in the world missed. Some people do not simply want the most efficient technology. They want the experience. They want the slowness. They want the grain and the imperfection and the weight. They want what George Eastman first promised them in 1888, not just a photograph, but a real memory. The Kodak moment lives on. The phrase Kodak moment is still part of the American vocabulary. You know what it means without being told? A moment so perfect, so fleeting, so exactly right that it demands to be captured. A moment you will want to hold on to forever. The phrase has outlived the film that inspired it. It has outlived the company's dominance. It may outlive the company itself. That is either the most profound tribute to what George Eastman created, or the most melancholy measure of what was lost. Probably both. Dan Sing Sing. The story of Kodak is taught in virtually every business school in the United States. It is cited in books about innovation, strategy, corporate culture, and the psychology of failure. It has become shorthand for a very specific and very preventable kind of mistake. But there is a danger in treating Kodak's failure as obvious, as something that anyone should have seen coming. The men and women who ran that company were not fools. Many of them were brilliant. They worked hard. They genuinely cared about the company and its people. They made decisions that seemed rational, even wise. Given what they knew at the time, the lessons of Kodak are not lessons about stupidity. They are lessons about the very human tendency to trust what has worked in the past, even when the present is already changing around you. Lesson 1. Success is the most dangerous condition for nearly a century. Kodak's formula was simple, and it worked. Make the best film, charge a premium for it, and protect the business through constant product improvement. Kodachrome to Kodacolor, 35mm to the Instamatic. Each new product was better than the last. Each one sold magnificently. That 100-year track record of success was not an asset in 1980. It was a liability. It made it genuinely hard to imagine that the formula could fail. It made the people running Kodak deeply reluctant to abandon a strategy that had worked so well for so long. For so many people, the same success that made Kodak great made it nearly impossible for Kodak to change. Lesson 2. Knowing is not the same as acting. One of the most important facts about the Kodak story is that the company knew. They had the McKinsey report from 1981. They had Steve Sassen's digital camera from 1975. They watched the Japanese electronics companies improving digital imaging every year through the 1980s. They saw the consumer cameras getting better and cheaper. Kodak is not the story of a company that didn't see what was coming. It is the story of a company that saw what was coming and could not bring itself to act with enough urgency and enough commitment to matter. Knowing the storm is coming is not the same as building the shelter. Lesson 3. Profit margins can be a trap. 70 cents of profit on every dollar of film revenue. That number sounds like pure good news. In the short run it made Kodak rich. And it funded George Eastman's extraordinary generosity toward his workers in his city. But in the long run, that 70% margin created a trap that Kodak could never quite escape. Every new technology they considered, digital cameras, electronic printing, photo sharing services, had margins of 10 or 15% at best. Why would any rational board of directors vote to invest billions in a new business that would earn a fraction of what the old business was generating? They wouldn't, and they didn't. Not until the old business had shrunk so dramatically that it could no longer sustain the company at all. The lesson is painful. Sometimes your greatest strength is the thing that kills you. Lesson 4. A brand name is not a guarantee. Kodak. In 1980, there was not a single American who did not recognize that name. It stood for quality, for reliability, for the safe and warm memory of Christmas morning and summer vacation and weddings and graduations. It did not matter. When digital cameras became good enough and affordable enough, American consumers switched. Not because they didn't love Kodak, many of them genuinely did, but because the new technology gave them something the old technology could not: instant pictures, immediately viewable, free to share, impossible to lose in a house fire. Brand loyalty is real. But it is not a wall. It is a grace period. And Kodak's grace period ran out before the transformation was complete. Lesson 5. The people always pay the price. Asterisk. The hardest lesson of the Kodak story is not about business strategy or technology cycles or corporate governance. It is about the people. 136,000 employees in 1982, under 5,000 today. Every number in that decline represents a human life that was disrupted, a career that ended sooner than expected, a pension that was reduced or eliminated, a family that had to make painful adjustments, a neighborhood that got quieter, a school that lost students, a church that lost members. When a great company fails, it is easy to focus on the abstract drama of it, the board meetings, the strategic mistakes, the missed opportunities. But the real cost is lived by the people on the factory floor and in the quality control labs and at the photo development counters who showed up faithfully every day and trusted that the institution would be there for them. They deserved better. Decisions from the people at the top. Most of them never got to say so. Asterisk. In 1888, George Eastman wrote to a friend, "What we want is to make photography an everyday affair, as common as the pencil." He got his wish. And then some. Today, human beings take approximately 1.8 trillion photographs every year. Not billion, trillion. More photographs are taken every 2 minutes in the 21st century than were taken in the entire 19th century. Virtually all of those photographs are taken on smartphones. Almost none are taken on film. Fewer and fewer carry the Kodak name. George Eastman's dream, that every person should be able to capture their memories, has been realized beyond anything he could have imagined. It's just that the company he built to realize it did not survive to see the fulfillment. Asterisk in 2012. Steve Sasson, the young engineer who built the world's first digital camera in a Kodak lab on Christmas Eve of 1975, was awarded the National Medal of Technology and Innovation by the President of the United States. He was 61 years old in accepting the award. He spoke with characteristic understatement about the managers who had told him, decades earlier, not to tell anyone about his invention. He said he bore them no grudge. He said they were good people making reasonable decisions within the logic of their time. He said, they were trying to protect the business they had. The problem was that the business they had was changing. And sometimes, when the world changes, the hardest thing to see is the change itself, because you're standing right in the middle of it. A company that stood right in the middle of the greatest transformation in the history of photography, the transformation they themselves had set in motion, and could not see it clearly enough, or move fast enough, or change deeply enough to survive it. Not because they were bad people, because they were human. They were trying to save the moment. Like all of us, they just couldn't hold on to it forever. None of us can.